Good morning, guys. I just finished the third chapter in Genesis, and it's on our Bible site. The I use King James Bible, and the title for chapter 3 is called "The Fall of Man" in King James Bible. I don't know what kind of Bible you use, or whether it's International or American Standard or whatever it is, but that's what it's called in the King James Bible. Let me get my seeing glasses on here. And of course, we all know the story of Adam and Eve and the fall from the garden. And there's a couple of things I'd like to go over. One is the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. Now, every verse in chapter 3 is material for a full sermon from a preacher. Chapter 3 in Genesis, in my estimation, is one of the most very beautiful chapters in the entire Bible. It starts our history as men and women, as human beings. It deals with Satan and Adam and Eve's fall from grace. Now, God made Adam and Eve to live forever. The tree of life was set in the garden, and even to touch a leaf on that tree of life healed all illness, kept Adam and Eve youthful. And we know that the tree of life will also be in the New Jerusalem, as we found out in Revelations, when it descends and becomes New Jerusalem and a new earth. It's mentioned, I think, 3 times. And so Adam and Eve needed the tree of life to live forever. But then again, God's plan for mankind had to be the fall of Adam and Eve, or they would have lived forever. We would have all lived forever, which would have been nice, of course, but especially when you're my age, thinking about living forever. Although with the aches and pains that I have now, I'm not sure I want to do that. But nevertheless, then we have the tree of good and evil. Now, the tree of good and evil was set more or less in the center of the garden. And once tasted of the fruit of this tree, this business of living forever and the tree of life was going to be a thing of the past, and Eve did so. Now, it says in my Bible, in King James Version, when Adam and Eve had already tasted of the fruit, and they heard God walking and talking in the garden. Now, let's stop here just for a second. Excuse me. We know that God was walking and talking we know that God was walking and talking in the garden. And let's think about that for a minute. If he was walking and talking, there was somebody else there, right? His son, Jesus Christ, would be a good guess at this point. And God's action, when he saw Adam and Eve covered up with a fig leaf that they'd sewn together to cover their genital area, he was unhappy with them. He asked Adam, "What'd you do that for?" And he said, "Well, Eve gave me the fruit." Now, let's think about that for a minute. Was Adam with Eve when she gave him the fruit? If he was, he had to know that he wasn't supposed to eat it, but he made the choice to eat it anyway. Now, that's something God does for us. He gives us a choice. And in verse, I think it's 22, maybe it's 21, God said, "So, behold, man has now learned of good and evil, and he's become as one of us." And God asked the question, or made the statement. He could reach out his hand and take from the tree of life and live forever. Now, in my Bible, the word forever is 2 words. Normally we put it 1 word. And I think he made that statement with intention, forever, to make a point. Also, we find in Eve's, or in the explanation in King James anyway, Eve said, "He beguiled me." He outsmarted her. He ran a little con on her. And she tasted of the fruit. Nevertheless, she knew that she wasn't supposed to do it. So here we are. He tells Adam, he said, "Look, because you did this, you're going to spend the rest of your life living by the sweat of your brow." He told him the food that you're going to eat is going to come out of the ground that you dig in. And it's not going to be easy. And it wasn't. He told Eve, "You're going to feel the pain of childbirth. And from that time to this, the pain of childbirth for a woman is excruciatingly painful." I've sat and listened to my wife birth our children. My daughter-in-law birthed children. There were screams and hollers of pain. So that was Eve's punishment. Then he turned to Satan. And he said, "Because you did this, you're going to spend the rest of your days on your belly crawling along the ground eating dust. Your head is going to be bruised by man. And you're going to bruise man's heel." And that's the way it's been. So, bringing it forward a little bit, also let me say here that these things that happen, the entire chapter 3 is a bigger picture than just every verse. So important. But these things that happened, as I see it, as I study and understand it, or try to understand it, are all part, or were all part, of God's plan. Of God's bigger plan. Because God put in man the ability to choose right from the get-go. Adam and Eve did choose. And so to blame Eve for all of this mess is wrong as far as I'm concerned. Because Adam had a choice too. But now we're to the point where God is going to throw them out of the garden. That's the only place they've ever been. That's all they've ever known. They were happy. They were healthy and they were young and strong. So here they go. And I have to assume that they walked out of the east part of the garden because that's where God placed the cherubim, which is an unearthly being put there or used in Scripture to do God's bidding or to do God's work. And these were put in the garden originally, I assume, I'm going to think, to help. So here's Adam and Eve walking out of the garden. Now to show God's compassion and His love, and His patience actually, we read this, that God made from animals coats for Adam and Eve so that they could cover their nakedness. He didn't have to do that. He could have just sent them on their way. So we got Adam and Eve with their heads down, feeling sorrow and ashamed, walking out of the garden. And there starts the history that we will cover through these 1,200 some pages of Scripture. From that point to this, Man has made the choice to do pretty much what he wants. We've also been given the opportunity to choose. And what will you choose? What will I choose? Well, we have to know that because of God's patience, all of these thousands of years, and of His compassion, and there will be a time when that's over. But, and we saw that in Revelation. But we have the opportunity to choose. And I'm going to conclude this little 10-minute thing here and say that perhaps it's time that we choose the right thing. Perhaps it's time that we choose to follow and believe God. What else is there? I would rather go through 70, 80, or 90 years of my life believing in God and be wrong than go through 70, 80, or 90 years of my life not believing in God and be wrong. So that's it for the day. I love you. If you want to subscribe, please do so. Have a great day. Hug somebody. It'll come back to you. Bye-bye.